In this video we're going to be looking at replacing fuel lines. So firstly, there's two different models you might come across. One where the primer bulb is part of the air cleaner housing, and I'll show you another one. This one where the carburetor has the primer bulb on top of it. So this one's only going to have two fuel lines running into it. One straight to the carburetor and then back to the fuel line. This other model here is slightly more complicated, but the process is still very simple. There's just one extra line in this one, so I'm going to show you this one because it's a more difficult one. Okay, to start with, we're going to empty the fuel out. So this one's actually empty, so there's nothing to empty out, and usually these fuel caps have a little retainer holding them inside the tank. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that and show you how to remove that, just in case yours has got that on there. So if we undo this one, you can see it's stuck in there. There's a retainer holding it in there. So to remove that is simply put your finger inside the tank and you can squeeze on the plastic and it will come out. So it's slightly wider than the hole there just to hold it in. If yours has that, that's how you remove it. If it doesn't, don't worry about it, that's fine. So to empty this out, I'll just put a container under there and roll it forward. And empty that fuel out. I've got a larger container that I'll then put that in, which I'll discard responsibly. I will never put that fuel back in the tank because there's debris and stuff in there. So I'm not replacing the fuel lines on this one today, so I'm just going to put this back together and we'll move ahead with the other one. Okay, so assuming that's off, we've emptied that, that's all fine. Now what we're going to do next is pull this. There's a filter inside the tank there, so we're going to get that out. To do that, I use a piece of wire, so you can use just any piece of wire that you've got with a hook bent on the end of it. So that's all you need. And if you have a look inside the tank, I don't know, you can just see there, down inside there's a little white cylinder. So we just, with our hook, just grab that line and pull it out, and there we go. That's the fuel filter right there. So we'll just leave that hanging out for now. Now we want to have a look, get a good understanding of where all these fuel lines go, which one's connected to this and how it's connected up behind here. So to do that, we're just going to remove this cover. This has got a screw holding this in. Yours might have clips or some other screws or something else. Just get rid of this outer piece, however yours needs to come off. We'll just set that to the side. Now this one doesn't have an air filter in there, but usually there would be a piece of foam around here. Just go ahead and remove that. And now to carry on, we need to remove these two screws. There's one here and one here. These could be, depending on what machine you've got, it could be a Phillips head screw, a flathead screw, two nuts holding it on there. This has what's called a torque bit, which is, it's like a star-shaped pattern. You can see it on the end of the drill there. You can pick these up at any hardware store for either for your drill, or you can just get them as a screwdriver. So I'm just going to go ahead. Actually, before I remove those, we want to check that there's nothing else attached to this. So we'll just turn this over. you can see on this model the cable comes in and is attached to this body. So to remove that, I'm just going to undo this screw here to loosen it off, just to lift this plate up. So that's just a flathead screwdriver. There we go. I've taken it right off, but there's no need to. You can just lift it up a little bit. But that cable, just want to show you this cable, it's just sitting in a groove under there. And then you can just slide it to the back. Again, yours may be completely different to that. That's okay. You just want to make sure that there's nothing attached to this. And if you undo these and then find something's attached, that's fine. You can just undo it then as well. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and remove these two now so I can lift this whole piece away. Okay, so you can remove these screws. You can see they're very long. They go right through the carburetor, which is behind here, which delivers the fuel into the motor. That holds this air cleaner housing and the carburetor to the engine, so that's fine. We can remove these. Again, nothing's going to jump out and bite you from behind there, so that's all okay. We can just peel this back slowly, and now you can see the carburetor's free off the motor. Just leave that sitting there, that's okay. Now we can have a clear view of the fuel line. So on this, there's 3 lines. So every time you've got this primer bulb connected to the housing, you're going to have 3 lines. One's going from the carburetor this side to the primer bulb down here. Now this primer bulb has a short prong and a long prong, which I'll show you in a minute. It's very important that they go around the right way. So at this stage, with everything like this, I would use your camera to take a photo so that you can see exactly which line this is attached to. So this line I can see comes down and comes out this one here. So this is the delivery line. So the fuel comes in through this filter, up the fuel line, into the carburetor, and then goes into the engine. This primer bulb actually sucks all the air out of here, so fuel will come up through here, flood inside here, and any excess will come into the primer bulb and then back down to the tank. Okay, so you don't really need to understand all that, just know that, take note of which way these all go. So you've taken a photo now, or scribbled a diagram or something. Now we can go ahead and remove the fuel lines. So I'm going to start with this line on here, so I'm just going to pry that off gently, and pry this one off. Okay, hopefully you can see there that this prong here is a lot longer than this one. So the long one is the one that always returns back to the fuel line. So it always returns back. Alright, I'm just going to set that aside for now. Now I'm going to remove this filter. So sometimes there can be a clip on there or something. I'll suggest replacing this. If you don't know the condition of this, just replace it. They're cheap anyway, so when you buy your fuel line and stuff, you can probably get it as a kit. And I generally buy these as a kit. So at this stage you can just cut that off because I'm going to get rid of it anyway. Otherwise you could just pull it off. It's just a barbed end. I'll show you that. So you can see it's just got a barbed end on it, so the fuel line just pushes on there. So This fuel line is completely free now, so I'm just going to pull that out. There we go. So that's the old line, so we'll just set that aside. You can pull this one off this side of the carby. You might need to pry it off a little bit. Again, we're replacing it, so it doesn't matter if you break it. They can get a little bit stuck on there at times, so when fuel's been sitting there, it can set like glue after a while, so you know, they could be fairly stuck on there. There we go, we've got that one off. Set that to the side because we can use them to measure the new lines. Now this one will take off. Just have to work it loose a little bit. They go on a lot easier than they come off because of the barbs on them to hold it on there. Okay, this one's being a little difficult, so I'm just going to get my knife and just give it a little slit down one side. Okay, I should be able to crack that off now. Yep, there we go. So just place the carburetor back where it was. These lines are sliding out fairly easily, but I'm just going to show you a way that you can get rid of them if you're having difficulty. So if this is really hard and brittle, sometimes you can't get it out. So what I would do is cut it off at the tank. So that's cut off, and then you can just get a screwdriver and just push it through back into the tank. Now we can turn this over. Just hold the carburetor because that might come loose, and then you can just shake out whatever's inside the tank. There we go, so you can see inside there, that was the plastic bit that's come off the tank and the bit of fuel line that we just cut and pushed back in. This carburetor can slide around and come loose, so don't worry about that, just line it back up. Okay, so if this fuel tank was really scummy and had lots of stuff in there, I'd get some warm soapy water and wash that out, but then give it a good day to dry properly. You don't want any water in there when you put it back. So now we're ready to put new fuel lines on there. To do that, I'm going to start, here's some new fuel lines. So I'm going to start by cutting the one end of it. This is just going to make it easier to get inside the tank. So just with some scissors, I'm just going to cut a little wedge off one end. Okay, you can see that. So now, using your diagram or your photo to get all this back together the way it was, just locate the hole that it went in. So this one came in this side, so pushing it down, just twist and push as you push it down and it should go in. Now you can use your hook that you made before just to go inside and grab that line, and then as you're pushing it through, you can bring it up to the surface, and when you can grab it with your fingers, you can just pull it out. Okay, now where you've cut it, you want to cut that off square. So cut that square. Now it's nice and square. I'm still waiting for some filters, so I don't have any new ones. However, just for this demonstration, I'll show you. This is a new filter. You've just got your new filter. You can just push that on the end. Now these can be a little bit tricky sometimes, but if you just work it in and keep pushing and twisting as you go, just work it on. The more you work it, the looser it gets. So if you struggle a few times first, just know that each time you do it, you're kind of stretching the silicone a little bit. So okay, that's on. So we'll drop that inside the tank, and you just want to make sure that that's sitting down near the middle of the tank, because that has to sit in the fuel when the fuel tank's low. So I'm just going to push that down. If you can see it down inside the tank there, down at the bottom. So that's fine. That's long enough. Now we're going to get the carburetor back in place and measure this up to the carburetor there, and just roughly mark where you want to cut it, and just go ahead and cut that off. And we can just go ahead and push that on. Try and get it up as far as you can, just to make sure it's not going to slide off. Okay, that's okay. Now the other one that comes from the longer side of the primer bowl back into the tank only has to go into the tank a centimetre or two. The fuel just has to go drop back in there, so you don't have to push it right the way in. So I'm just going to drop this end in. Again, I'm just going to cut the end of it off. Okay. Just going to slide that back in. Now I can see it's only, I don't know if you can see that, it's only in an inch or so. That's fine. I'm not even going to bother cutting the end off, so that's okay. We could have used this one here, the old one, we'll just use that to get the rough length. So that's about okay. Otherwise you could just hold the primer here, and that's about the length you want there. So just mark that. Doesn't have to be exact, just close enough. Cut that off, and we'll go ahead and reattach that. And that one goes to the long side of that primer. There we go. And now we'll just use this last little bit that we took off. We'll just measure that using the old one. And we can put one side back onto the carburetor. And then one side back onto the primer. And there we go, that's all the fuel lines replaced now, so that's great. So we'll just go back and pop all this back together. So just the reverse of what we did before, just line that carburetor back up again with the holes, get your air cleaner in place, and you can just drop your screws back in. go ahead and tighten that up. Don't want to over tighten those screws, just want to nip it down. Okay, put this cable back on here. Just push that back in. Okay, that cable's back on there, and that's it. You've replaced the fuel lines now, so put your air cleaner, air filter back in there, and put your cover back on. Put your fuel tank back in. If you had the plastic clip, you can just clamp it together and push it in, and then screw your lid on, fill it up with fuel obviously, and away you go. You've finished replacing your fuel lines.